The clock read exactly 2:20 when Carlos Mendonça, a 72-year-old man with graying hair and time-worn hands, received the news that would change the course of his final days. Sitting in the doctor's office, with the white walls reflecting the afternoon sunlight of Toledo, he watched Dr. Ramirez utter words that felt like a sentence. Pancreatic cancer, advanced stage. I'm sorry to inform you, Mr. Mendonça, but we're talking about 3 to 6 months. The doctor continued speaking, but Carlos was no longer listening. His mind drifted to the 43 years he had spent alongside Elizabeth, his wife who had passed away 5 years ago, to the faces of their 2 children, Marina and Eduardo, and to the urgent decisions he now needed to make. As he left the office, the sky over Toledo seemed different. The towers of the cathedral he admired now cast shadows resembling the hands of a giant clock, counting down the time he had left. Carlos walked slowly through Plaza Zocodover, feeling the weight of his 72 years like never before. The bench where he used to sit to feed the pigeons was occupied by a young couple in love, oblivious to the old man watching them with a mix of nostalgia and melancholy. That night, in his apartment in the historic center of the city, Carlos stayed awake until dawn. The walls adorned with photographs seemed to tell the story of a life well lived. His marriage to Elizabeth, the births of Marina and Eduardo, family trips, graduations, Marina's wedding to Lucas. He thought of Eduardo, who had moved to Barcelona 8 years ago, building his career as an architect. He rarely saw him, only on holidays or during sporadic video calls. His thoughts then turned to Marina, his eldest daughter. Their relationship had grown increasingly distant in recent years. Marina, an executive at a major bank in Madrid, always seemed too busy for long visits or phone calls that lasted more than a few minutes. The coolness in her voice was something Carlos noticed but preferred to ignore, attributing it to the stress of her professional life. And then there was Lucas. His son-in-law, a dedicated elementary school teacher, had always shown genuine care for Carlos. Even before Elizabeth's death, Lucas was a constant presence at Sunday lunches, celebrations, always willing to help, to talk, to simply be there. Carlos picked up the phone. It was 5 a.m. when he dialed Marina's number. The family meeting took place 2 days later. The living room of Carlos's apartment, with its antique furniture and the distinctive smell of the books lining the dark wooden shelves, felt too small to contain all the emotions swirling in the space. Marina arrived first, elegant as ever in her navy suit, her brown hair neatly tied up in a bun. She barely embraced her father, placing a quick kiss on his cheek before checking her messages on her phone. Lucas followed closely behind, carrying a bouquet of lilies, Carlos's favorite flowers since Elizabeth tended to them in the small garden on their balcony. "How are you feeling, Carlos?" Lucas asked, embracing his father-in-law with genuine concern. Eduardo arrived last, coming straight from the airport. His hug with his father lingered, filled with a longing that he rarely expressed in words. Eduardo's eyes, so much like Elizabeth's, already hinted at his intuition about the gravity of the situation. Carlos watched the 3 of them sitting on his couch. The evening light streaming through the windows created a scene he wished he could freeze in time. With a steady voice, despite the fatigue that was already evident, he revealed the diagnosis: pancreatic cancer, terminal, 3 to 6 months, according to Dr. Ramirez. The silence that followed was broken by Eduardo's stifled sob. Marina remained impassive, as if she were at a business meeting. Lucas immediately stood up, moving toward Carlos and holding his hands. "We'll seek other opinions, other treatments. We can't just accept this," Lucas said, his voice choked with emotion. Marina glanced at her wristwatch before speaking. "Dad, have you thought about how you want to organize everything? Who will take care of you? We need to be practical." Carlos noticed the disapproving look Lucas cast at his wife. Eduardo, still processing the news, discreetly wiped away tears. "I can take a leave from work, Dad. Go back to Barcelona just to wrap up some pending matters and then come here," Eduardo offered. "No, son. Your life is there now. I don't want you to abandon your projects," Carlos replied, with the calmness of someone who had already reflected deeply on the matter. Marina checked her watch again. "I have an important meeting tomorrow morning in Madrid." I can't be away from the bank for long periods. You know how it is. Maybe we can hire a nurse." It was then that Lucas, without looking at his wife, made the proposal that would change everything. "I can take care of you, Carlos. My hours at school are flexible. I can rearrange my classes. I'll stay here for as long as necessary." Carlos observed Marina's expression harden. She and Lucas exchanged tense glances, a silent conversation that seemed to reveal deeper conflicts Carlos was just beginning to perceive. That night, after everyone left, Carlos remained seated in his favorite armchair, contemplating the photograph of Elisabetta on the table beside him. "What would you do, my love?" he whispered to the smiling image of his wife, as if she could respond from the other side of eternity. The following weeks brought a new routine to Carlos's apartment. Lucas, keeping his promise, organized himself to be present every day. He would arrive in the morning, prepare breakfast, help Carlos with his medication, accompany him to medical appointments, and on afternoons when his father-in-law felt better, they would go for short walks through Toledo's historic center. "Do you remember that restaurant where you and Mom celebrated your 40th wedding anniversary?" Lucas asked as they walked slowly down Calle Santo Tomé. Carlos smiled, leaning on his son-in-law's arm. "El Olivo. Elisabetta loved their soupy rice. Do you remember?" "How could I forget? It was at that dinner that I asked for Marina's hand." Carlos's smile faded slightly. "Marina never was one to show affection. She's always been reserved like me. Elisabetta was the one who overflowed with emotion for all of us." Lucas nodded silently, his thoughts clearly on the absent wife. Marina visited her father on Sundays, for increasingly shorter periods. Her visits were marked by frequent phone calls, messages she needed to respond to, and a constant rush to return to Madrid. During one of those Sunday visits, Carlos observed the dynamic between the couple. Marina barely directed her gaze at Lucas, responding with monosyllables to his questions. When Lucas mentioned canceling a school trip to be available for Carlos, Marina didn't hide her irritation. "You're compromising your career by choice, Lucas. Don't blame my father's situation for it." Marina's cold and cutting tone created an uncomfortable silence in the room. Carlos, pretending to be more tired than he truly was, asked to retire to his room, giving the couple privacy to continue their discussion. However, from the slightly open door of his room, Carlos could hear the conversation. "Do you think I don't notice your absences, Marina? The nights you don't come home? The excuses about late meetings?" Lucas's normally gentle voice carried a deep hurt. "Don't start with these unfounded jealousies. You know how demanding the financial sector is. It's not jealousy when I find hotel receipts in Madrid on your statements, or when I get calls from people at the bank looking for you at times when you're supposedly in meetings." Marina laughed, a cold sound that reached Carlos's ears like a painful revelation. "If you want to keep up with these conspiracy theories, feel free. I have to go back to Madrid. I have an important presentation tomorrow." "Important like the financial conference in Barcelona last month? The one where you appeared in photos next to a certain Paulo Lopez?" The silence that followed was more revealing than any answer. Carlos felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his illness. His daughter, his Marina, was betraying not only her husband, but all the values he and Elisabetta had tried to instill in her. That night, after Marina's stormy departure, Lucas stayed in the apartment. Carlos found him on the balcony, gazing at the lights of the old city, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hands. "You heard, didn't you?" Lucas asked without turning around. Carlos approached, leaning on the railing beside his son-in-law. "Yes. I should have seen it sooner. The signs were all there. Love blinds us, son. We believe the best of the people we care about until the reality becomes impossible to ignore." Lucas turned to Carlos, his red eyes holding back unshed tears. "You know what's most ironic? Despite everything, I'm here. Not for her, but for you. Because you and Elisabetta have been more family to me over the last 10 years than my own parents." Carlos embraced his son-in-law, feeling in that moment a certainty he hadn't experienced since the diagnosis. He needed to do something to correct the injustice unfolding before his eyes. Carlos's physical deterioration progressed more rapidly than expected. 3 months after the diagnosis, he had already lost 15 pounds, and the pain, despite the medication, became increasingly difficult to manage. Lucas remained by his side, administering medications, preparing meals that Carlos could barely eat, reading to him on nights when sleep wouldn't come. Eduardo traveled monthly from Barcelona to Toledo, spending an entire weekend with his father. During one of those visits, he confronted his sister about her absence. "Marina, do you realize our father is dying while you barely show up to see him?" Eduardo's voice echoed through the apartment's kitchen while Lucas accompanied Carlos to a medical appointment. Marina, fiddling with her designer handbag as if looking for something important, replied, without looking at her brother, "Not all of us have the freedom to abandon our responsibilities, Eduardo. Some of us have careers that require constant presence." "A career? Is that what you call what you're doing?" Eduardo stepped toward his sister. "Do you think I don't know about Paulo Lopez? Toledo isn't that big, Marina. People talk." Marina's face paled for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the man you've been seen with in Madrid, the same one who appeared at that conference in Barcelona. Do you think Lucas doesn't deserve to know?" Marina laughed, a sound devoid of any joy. "Lucas knows exactly what he's getting into. If he prefers to play nurse to dad instead of taking care of his own life, that's his problem. How can you be so cold? We're talking about our father, and Lucas has been more of a son to him in the last few months than both of us combined." The argument was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. To both their surprise, it was Lucas, pushing in the wheelchair where Carlos sat, visibly worn out after the appointment. The silence that settled in the room was heavy, laden with unresolved tensions. That night, after everyone left, Carlos asked Lucas to help him with something important. "I need you to book a trip to Madrid for next week. There are matters I need to resolve in person." Lucas looked concerned. "Are you sure, Carlos?" The doctor recommended complete rest. "There are things a man needs to organize before he departs, Lucas. Trust me." The following week, despite Lucas's and the doctor's objections, Carlos traveled to Madrid. At the office of Notary Alvarez, an old friend from his university days, he rewrote his will. The house in Toledo, 2 apartments in Salamanca he had rented for years, and all his savings, a considerable fortune built over decades of work as a civil engineer, now had a new destination. "Are you sure about this, Carlos?" the notary asked, adjusting his glasses to reread the document. "More sure than I've ever been, Alvarez. Life teaches us to recognize who truly cares about us. Sometimes the family we choose is more real than the one we're born into." Back in Toledo, Carlos felt a peace he hadn't experienced since the diagnosis. Watching Lucas sleep in the chair next to his bed, exhausted after another day of constant care, he knew he had made the right choice. Winter arrived in Toledo with an unusual severity. The cobblestone streets of the historic center, usually bustling with tourists even in low season, were almost deserted under the gray sky. In Carlos's apartment, the heater worked constantly to keep the environment comfortable. Lucas had turned the living room into an improvised bedroom for Carlos, to avoid him having to go up and down the stairs leading to the second floor. A hospital bed now occupied the spot where the sofa once sat, positioned so Carlos could view the inner courtyard of the building, where a solitary lemon tree resisted the cold. Carlos's health was deteriorating rapidly. The doctors, surprised by his resilience, had extended the initial prognosis, but it was evident to everyone that the end was near. Marina continued her Sunday visits, each time shorter, while Eduardo now spent an entire week each month in Toledo. It was during one of those weeks that Eduardo found Lucas in the kitchen, preparing broth for Carlos. Exhaustion was visible on his brother-in-law's face. Deep, dark circles, an unshaven beard, his body noticeably thinner. "Lucas, you need to rest. I can stay with him tonight," Eduardo offered. Lucas smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "I'm fine, really. Just a little worried about school expenses. I've been away for 3 months. Isn't Marina helping with the expenses?" Lucas's silence was answer enough. "Have you two talked? About Paulo Lopes?" Lucas dropped the spoon he had been stirring the broth with, leaning against the kitchen counter. "She denies it. Says they're just colleagues at work, that I'm being paranoid. But I know Eduardo. I've known for months. Why do you stay then? Any other man would have..." Any other man wouldn't have promised Carlos he'd stay until the end, Lucas interrupted, his voice firm despite his fatigue. I'm not here for Marina. I'm here for him. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. To both their surprise, it was Marina, outside of her usual visiting hours. I need to talk to you, she said to Lucas, completely ignoring her brother. In private. Eduardo retreated to Carlos's room, where he slept under the effects of painkillers. From the kitchen, he could hear fragments of the conversation, which quickly turned into an argument. I can't keep going like this. You think I don't know where you've been this weekend? A whole life ahead of me. And what would your father think? The last sentence Eduardo clearly heard was Marina's voice, sharp as steel. I've made my decision, Lucas. I'm moving to Barcelona, with Paulo. He got a promotion at the bank there. When Eduardo returned to the kitchen, he found Lucas sitting at the table, his face in his hands. On the counter, the broth for Carlos overflowed from the pot, spilling onto the stove like the silent tears running down the man's face, who, despite everything, had remained true to the promise made to a dying man. In the makeshift bedroom, Carlos, who wasn't as sedated as everyone thought, had heard every word. A solitary tear ran down his wrinkled face as he gazed at the lemon tree in the courtyard, now covered by a thin layer of snow, resilient but increasingly fragile under the weight of the merciless winter. The end came on a March morning when the first flowers began to bloom on the trees in Toledo. Carlos passed away peacefully in his sleep, with Lucas holding his hand. Eduardo, who had arrived from Barcelona the night before, was at his side. Marina, informed immediately, said she'd catch the first train from Madrid, but arrived only for the funeral proceedings. The funeral was simple, just as Carlos had requested. The Toledo cemetery, overlooking the Tagus River, received the body of the retired engineer under a surprisingly blue sky. Lucas remained stoic throughout the ceremony, supporting Eduardo, who couldn't hold back his tears. Marina kept her distance, standing next to a man no one knew, but whom everyone immediately recognized as Paulo Lopez, tall, athletic, at least 10 years younger than her, with a barely concealed air of impatience. 2 days after the funeral, everyone was summoned by Notary Alvarez for the reading of the will. The office in Madrid, with its dark wood-paneled walls and shelves filled with legal books, felt too small to contain all the emotions swirling in the space. Marina arrived accompanied by Paulo, who was carrying something no one expected, a 2-month-old baby wrapped in a blue blanket. The silence that settled in the room was absolute. Lucas, sitting next to Eduardo, visibly paled. "This is Antonio," Marina announced, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "My son with Paulo." Eduardo stood up abruptly, but Lucas held him back, remaining seated, his face an impenetrable mask. Notary Alvarez, sensing the tension, cleared his throat and began reading the will. The first provisions were formal, dealing with bureaucratic matters. Then came the part that would forever change the lives of everyone present. I, Carlos Mendonça, in full possession of my mental faculties, leave to my daughter, Marina Mendonça Oliveira, the sum of 10,000 euros. To my son, Eduardo Mendonça, I leave the same sum of 10,000 euros. Marina smiled, satisfied. She was already planning how to invest her share of the inheritance, the house in Toledo, and the apartments in Salamanca, in a new business with Paulo. The notary continued, "All the rest of my assets, including the house in Toledo, the 2 apartments in Salamanca, my bank accounts and investments, I leave to Lucas Oliveira, my son-in-law, as recognition for the love, dedication, and loyalty demonstrated not only during my illness, but throughout all the years he has been part of our family." Marina's face transformed into a mask of fury. "This is impossible. He manipulated my father. This can't be legal." Notary Alvarez, unfazed, continued, "Your father was perfectly lucid when he drafted this will. We have medical reports proving his mental capacity at the time of signing." Paulo, who had remained silent until then, placed the baby in Marina's arms and addressed Lucas. "We will contest this legally. You're not going to keep what belongs to her family." It was Eduardo who responded, his voice surprisingly firm. "Lucas is more family to my father than you'll ever be, Paulo. And from what I see, he's been more of a husband to my sister than you intend to be." The meeting ended in uproar. Marina and Paolo stormed out, promising lawsuits and challenges. Eduardo and Lucas remained in the office, reading and rereading their letters, as if seeking in them the presence of Carlos. In Lucas's letter, Carlos's words echoed with the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to understand the true value of human relationships. "Lucas, my son not born of blood, but of the heart, I leave to you not only material possessions, but the recognition that true family is formed through love and loyalty. Elisabetta would be proud to see you by my side until the end. Use what I leave you to rebuild your life, to find the happiness you deserve. Life is too short to be lived in the shadow of betrayal and ingratitude. Go forward, with my blessing and my eternal gratitude." 2 years passed since Carlos's death. Lucas, using part of the inheritance, moved to Burgos, where he opened a restaurant named La Cocina de Carlos, specializing in traditional Spanish dishes. The establishment quickly gained a reputation for excellent food and a warm atmosphere. It was there that Lucas met Clara, a businesswoman from the wine industry who visited the restaurant for a tasting. The love that blossomed between them was gradual and genuine, built on a foundation of mutual respect and admiration. Marina, on the other hand, faced tough times. Her attempts to contest the will were all rejected. Her banking career ended abruptly when irregularities in her transactions were discovered. Paolo, seeing her financial situation deteriorate, left her for a successful businesswoman, taking little Antonio with him. On a rainy November day, Lucas found Marina waiting at the restaurant door after closing time. Prematurely aged by stress and hardship, she barely resembled the elegant and proud woman she once was. "I need your help, Lucas," she pleaded. "I've lost everything. My job, Paolo, my son. I have nowhere to go." Lucas observed his ex-wife for a long moment. There was no anger in his heart, only a deep understanding of human fragility. "I can't offer what you're looking for, Marina. That story has ended for both of us. But I can help you find a place to stay, a temporary job, out of respect for what we once shared." Marina, with tears in her eyes, nodded. "You've always been better than I deserved, haven't you? It's not about deserving, Marina. It's about choices. Each of us reaps what we sow." That same night, after escorting Marina to a boarding house in the city center, Lucas returned to the apartment he shared with Clara. She was waiting for him on the balcony, watching the rain with a glass of wine in her hands. "How did it go?" Clara asked, her voice free of judgment. Lucas embraced her from behind, gently kissing her neck. "It was like closing a book you've already finished reading. You know the ending, but still feel a certain melancholy as you turn the last page." Clara turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the balcony. "And now?" "Now," Lucas smiled, "we start a new book. Together." On the wall of the living room, a photograph of Carlos smiled softly, as if approving the scene. The legacy of the old engineer was not just in the material possessions he left behind, but in the lessons of love, loyalty, and forgiveness that transformed the lives of all around him. If this story touched your heart as it did mine while narrating it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like Carlos's and Lucas's remind us that true family is not always the one we're born into, but the one we build with love, respect, and loyalty. Until the next narrative.